Highway 15. There is an old stretch of highway in the Nevada desert that is out of commission officially, but is still used by locals for shortcut purposes. Old Highway 15 was its number designation. It was decommissioned in 2007 when a brand new, more direct highway was constructed, connecting the northern and southern parts of the state. It was one of the first highways constructed in the state, making it old and in constant need of repairs. Also, with a stretch of highway that old, it of course has seen its fair share of carnage and gore, fatalities, accidental and non, murders. It's all happened on Highway 15. The highway has developed quite the reputation as being haunted, not just the most haunted in the state, but in the entire country as well. If you ask locally, they will say that was the real reason the highway was closed. The highway, being as old as it is, has many ghosts that people have come across and have claimed to have seen. The ghosts, spanning many different decades from many walks of life, can usually be seen when the sun sets over the desert horizon. There's the woman in white. Funny enough, there always seems to be a lady in white. Many different roads in many different cities and towns have one. The lady in white on Highway 15, however, is said to have met a horrific demise. One night, in 1963, her car blew a flat tire. She pulled over right away and began to repair it herself. The tire jack must not have been put in properly. It was pitch black out after all. Or maybe the device was faulty. Whatever the case, the tire jack snapped loose and the car smashed back down to the ground, startling her. She fell backwards onto the highway, and as she tried to get up, a speeding car ran over her skull, killing her instantly. Her name was Julie. You might see Julie, the lady in white, if your car gets a flat tire and you're trying to fix it on the side of the road. But don't be afraid. She's only trying to help. Another ghost you might see wandering down the old desert highway is the spirit of little Brody Riley. At least 5 years of age, he was able to free himself from his car seat and open the back seat door. He fell out of the moving vehicle, and before his parents could act, he was ran over by oncoming traffic, the details too gruesome to repeat. He is said to show up when improper safety procedures are taking place on the road, so whatever you do, keep it safe out there. The most famous ghost out on Highway 15, however, and the ghost that you don't want to have a run-in with, is the ghost of Natalie Hatchery, a woman in her early 20s. She was hitchhiking down the dark desert highway one night in 1973 when she was picked up by who people think to have been the Desert Strangler, a serial killer who claimed multiple victims on Old Highway 15 during the time. Her body was found savagely ripped apart on the side of the road, not only by the Desert Strangler's savagery, but also by the desert animals that decided to feast on her flesh. She was left strewn on the side of the road and discarded disrespectfully. It is said that is why she haunts the old highway. It is said she's a protector of young women who break down on the highway, but if you're a man traveling alone, beware, for she does not take kindly to male travelers driving down her highway. It is said men driving past the spot where she was horrifically killed will experience tire blowouts, engine failure, objects hitting their windows, etc. While stranded on the side of the highway, there are accounts of the men being scratched, sudden fainting, chest pains, and extreme sharp pains that emanate through the entire body. I can attest first-handedly, for I felt the spectral attack personally as I drove down the highway, alone one dark, stormy desert night. So, gentlemen, beware of Natalie if you travel alone. And as for everyone else, you best think twice before taking that shortcut. Or do you think you have what it takes to travel down Highway 15 alone? The 666 House. Beneath the bright lights of the Las Vegas Strip, nestled within the desert valley, sits a property that once sat a house with a dark history upon its supposedly haunted land. Construction of the upscale mansion began in 1988 and was finished the following year. A strange occurrence seemed to take place right away with the address, which was 6690 South Pecos Road, but the 9 would always come loose and flip upside down, making another 6. From there on out, being referred to as the 666 House. The home sat nestled in an upscale neighborhood directly across the street from Las Vegas entertainer Wayne Newton's mansion. But even surrounded by glitz and glamour, couldn't save it from the strange and unusual things that would take place within its walls. No one knows exactly why the original owners let go of the home or what even became of them. There have been countless rumors of supernatural events driving them away and forcing them to sell. After that, the trail of ownership changes and unexplainable events become long and winding. 11 deaths have been attributed to the home, either people who have resided there or people associated with the property. Sudden and sometimes unexplainable deaths, to suicides, to even murder. No matter who owned the home, tragedies seemed to follow, accompanied with supernatural events. As ownership changed hands and the home became older through the years, the new owners wanted to make changes and remodel their new home. The only problem with that, though, was the renovations could never be completed. Complaints from the construction crews would consist of their tools moving on their own, their tools disappearing, and even strange workplace accidents. Eventually, these incidents drove the construction crews away from the final owners, who were never able to finish renovations. No construction company would work on this seemingly haunted property. So, the home sat and eventually became abandoned and unprotected, nobody knowing who actually still owned the home. Locally, the rumors of it being haunted began to spread, attracting the serious and unserious alike. People would break into the now abandoned mansion and explore the decrepit, unfinished home. People would report strange noises and items moving, spectral voices being heard, and even unseen spirit attacks. Of course, with the knowledge of the home being haunted and possibly cursed, attracted unsavory groups such as satanic cults. Pentagrams and satanic writing could be found throughout on the house's walls, and it is said that the spirit of a young girl haunted the abandoned building who was sacrificed by the cult. It continued to sit unclaimed and abandoned, even catching fire at one point in 2006. No one knows for certain why. Some say it was one of the evil spirits that haunted the home. Others say it was the homeless squatters trying to keep warm. Whatever the case, it didn't stop people from breaking in and exploring the abandoned haunted home, and amateur ghost hunters trying to catch a real-life ghost on camera. Until one day, however, the home was demolished and destroyed by a neighbor of the haunted 666 home after his son took his own life after spending time inside the home. The land now sits vacant, and a tall wall surrounds the entire property, protecting people from the cursed land. People that are foolish enough to scale the wall are said to experience a string of bad luck events, even accidents. So please, if you're smart, you'll heed the warnings. Or next, we'll hear about what the 666 house has done to you. The Hitchhiker. I ran to my dorm room after my final class ended. I opened the door, collected my bags, said goodbye to my roommate, and walked to my car. It was winter break, and all I could think of was getting the hell out of here and going home to my family. I had no time to waste. I had to drive cross-country, and if I wanted to make it home on time, I needed to leave right away. By midnight, I was driving through the Arizona desert. My eyelids were getting heavy. Cigarettes and coffee were my friends, but I couldn't stop. I was almost at the state line. Home was nearly there. As I turned the corner, my headlight caught the silhouette of what looked like a female hitchhiker. I drove past her, but almost immediately put on the brakes. I know. I should never pick up hitchhikers, but it was pitch black out there, and it had started to rain. I backed up my car, reached over and opened the passenger side door. A dark-haired, what looked to be 5'2", beautiful young woman bent down and asked if she could get a ride to Las Vegas. I said, of course, since I was heading the same way. She put her bag in the back seat, closed the door, and sat up front. She thanked me over and over. I said it was no problem. I could see she was shivering from the rain, so I turned on the heater, reached in the back seat, and handed her my sweater. I asked her what she was doing out there, all alone. She replied that she was on her way home from college for winter break. I told her I was doing the same, which broke the ice, and we began to get to know each other. As she was speaking, I gave her a once-over and noticed she seemed out of place. I don't know how to explain it. Her clothes, her mannerisms, hell, even how she spoke, seemed like it was from a different era. I didn't think too hard on it, though. She seemed like a sweet girl, and I was enjoying her company. After only a few miles, we were already becoming fast friends. It's strange, but there was just something about this girl. We even talked about hanging out during our time off, before heading back to school. I even told her I would drive her back to her school on my way back to mine when our break was over. After about an hour, I noticed I was getting low on gas. Thankfully, we were now at the state line, and there was a gas station right before we crossed over into Nevada. I got out and went to pay for the gas and asked her if she would start pumping. As I got to the door, I turned back and saw her put the hose in the gas tank. I turned around, opened the door, and told the cashier, 20 on 5, please. My friend is already pumping it. The cashier looked at me with a smirk on his face and said there's no gas being pumped on 5, looking at me like I was nuts. I handed him the 20 and said, what are you talking about? Turned and pointed towards the car and said, my friend, she's right there. Nobody was there. I ran out of the station towards the car, but there was no sign of her. She was gone, even her bag. A voice behind me said, you met Mary, mister. I turned around. It was the cashier. I asked him what he was talking about. He proceeded to ask me if I had just picked up her hitchhiking. I said yes. Then he asked if she wore clothes that seemed from a different era. and spoke like she was from a different era as well. I said, "Yes, that's exactly her. But how did you know that?" "That's Mary," he said. "Everyone knows her around here. She's haunted this stretch of highway for decades now, and always this same time of year. Mary was killed in 1955. Her body was found about an hour back from where you came, lying on the side of the road with her throat cut. She was on her way back home to Vegas from college for winter break." "Wait a minute. You're telling me I gave a ride to a hitchhiking ghost?" I said sarcastically. "You sure did. You're not the first guy to do it, you know," the cashier said. My God, I thought to myself. I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. I walked towards my car and looked inside the passenger door window to see if there was any trace of her. The only thing that was there was my sweater, lying on the passenger seat, and it was soaking wet. I'm a Postmates delivery driver based in Northwest Las Vegas, Nevada. I've seen some weird shit. I was browsing this sub and I came across the old posts by the guy from the U.S. Forest Service Search and Rescue, talking about all the weird stuff he's seen and heard over the course of his career. I've been running Postmates here for a while now, and I can guarantee that rural areas do not have a monopoly on bizarre and creepy shit. I thought I would share some stories of what I've seen on the job. For clarity, I live in Las Vegas, Nevada, suburb of Centennial Hills on the outskirts of the city. I deliver around there, in Summerlin, and in North Las Vegas, and the inner city near downtown. I work the night shift often because there's less competition for offers. The first thing that you'll notice if you hang out in the outskirts of Vegas at unconventional hours is all the beat-up cars that are sitting around, empty, at every dead end directly facing the desert. If you don't believe me, go to one of these roads in a residential area near or after nightfall, and you'll always see at least one of them, just sitting there with no reason. They're never there in the daytime, and they are always facing away from the desert toward the city. Some of them I've seen idling with the lights on and no one inside the vehicle. To this day, I have never met anyone who has been able to tell me what those cars are doing there or who they belong to. One time, I was delivering McDonald's to an apartment complex and accidentally ended up on the wrong floor. A middle-aged white guy, one of those types that looks really tough without you really being able to tell why, answered the door. He took one look at me and said, "Is it done?" I thought he meant the food delivery, so I was like, "Yeah, here you go." He gestured toward the burger bag. "So the proof's in there?" Surprised the mess isn't leaking out. At this point, I was weirded out enough that I glanced at my phone and realized I was at the wrong address, and I promptly turned around and bolted without saying anything. I suppose I'm lucky that there were some other people walking around the apartment lot at the time. If there weren't, I suspect I would have gotten shot before I made it to my car. I was out in the early morning, about 1:15 in the morning, coming back from a delivery in the lots near Lone Mountain, where there are large abandoned fields of dirt which separate the gigantic McMansions, when I saw a huge blaze of light in the middle of one of the fields. I pulled over to see what it was, and it turned out that there was a huge SUV on fire. No one else was around, just me and the burning car. I decided I'd call 911 and report it. I told the responder what was happening and the location of the lot. He sighed. "This isn't a number for prank calls, buddy. Tell your friends to knock this shit off. It's been long enough." Then he hung up. I was baffled as to what this reaction was about, but I decided to keep moving. Exactly 4 months later, I'm coming back from the same delivery along the same route, and lo and behold, I once again see the burning SUV in the exact same position as before. Check the time, and sure enough, it was 1:15. I mentioned later to my mom that this happened, and she was surprised. She said she'd seen a van burning in that lot late at night, 10 years ago. Suffice to say, I avoid that route at that time of night now. One Sunday afternoon, I took a large delivery from a natural smoothie place to one of the giant houses at the edge of Summerlin. For those unfamiliar with Vegas districts, this is where the very rich, well-connected people live. I don't really remember what the place looked like, but I know it was practically a mansion. A young woman in her 20s opened the door. She was strikingly attractive, and she was wearing a tight-fitted white dress. I was obviously turned on a bit, but there was also something a tiny bit unsettling about her. She smiled and asked me if I could put the delivery bag in the kitchen. I followed her into the house and noticed that everything was bright, clean, and immaculately polished. The kitchen was a little ways into the house, and it adjoined the living room. In the living room there were 2 white couches, one of them empty, and the other containing 5 more women, all unbelievably beautiful, and all wearing the same white dress. I set the bag on the kitchen counter and turned to the woman who'd greeted me at the door to get the all clear. I found her staring at me, smiling. She was just so entrancing that I returned the stare, gazing into her eyes. "Now, you want to sit down on the couch?" she said serenely. As she said it, I remember that an intensely pleasurable feeling started coursing through my body. It was from her, I sensed. Her eyes, her words. I had to follow them. After that, I don't recall anything. My next memory is driving down Charleston Boulevard several hours later. I didn't feel any different, but that night I did notice that there was an odd bruise on the back of my neck, with a tiny skin blemish I didn't have before in the center of it. Months later, the bruise is gone, but I still have that blemish. Being horny makes me dumb, I'm ashamed to say that I've tried to revisit the house on several occasions since, but I legitimately can't remember anything about where it was located, and I've never been able to find it again. A few months back, around 10 p.m., I got a ping for a restaurant that was miles from where I was, which usually signifies an order that no one else wants to take. It looked like an easy pickup and drop-off, so I was a bit confused as to why no one wanted to take it. I take literally every order that comes my way, so of course I accepted. The pickup was at this quaint little diner on Decatur Boulevard, which looked like it had been there since the 80s, at least. I was in and out of there quick, and nothing really seemed problematic or off. The drop-off was close, nearby, on a street filled with ancient, sprawling one-story homes. It was a decaying house, with several dead trees in the front yard. It looked like no one had taken care of it for decades. Granted, that's par for the course in some of the older districts of Vegas, but the strangest thing was that the lots on either side of it had been completely razed. There'd been houses there once. That much was clear, but not any longer. There was nothing like that anywhere else on the street that I saw. Every other lot was filled. I had a feeling in the pit of my stomach that I shouldn't go up to the door, but the delivery had to be completed or I'd get in trouble with corporate. I went up the walk and knocked. There was no answer. I knocked again, harder. No answer. I figured I'd call the number attached to the order before I just left it there. It rang a few times, then picked up. There was silence for a few seconds, and then a click, and the call ended. At this point, I was completely ready to nope out of there. So I put the food on the doorstep and turned to leave. I had made it halfway down the walk when I heard the door creaking open behind me. I turned to see who was there. There was no one. The door stood open, revealing a dark and dilapidated hallway, which looked even more decrepit than the rest of the house. It extended back further than the light would allow me to see, but I had the distinct feeling that someone, or something, was watching me from the end of the hallway. When I made it back to my car, I was literally shaking. All I wanted to do was go far away from whatever was in that hallway. I didn't take any more orders that night, and I didn't get any sleep either. In the morning, I decided to call the number again to see if anyone would answer. It had been disconnected. I have plenty more stories. If you all want to hear them, let me know any questions you have, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. The Christmas Party. Every year, a week before Christmas, my family would hold a Christmas party at my grandma's sister's house in Las Vegas. The whole family would show up. Me, my mom, grandma, aunt, great-grandma, uncle, cousins, the whole family. You get the picture. In and out retrieving presents from the cars and bringing them inside. Non-stop action. Everyone having a good time exchanging presents, eating good food. It was a great family tradition. The problem is, with all the traffic in and out, no one ever remembered to lock the front door. Why would you? The house is packed. There's 20 people in here at least. But on this night, the what could go wrong went wrong. It started off like any other year. Family walking in, one by one, presents in hand. Smiles and hugs and small conversations fill the house as family members get reacquainted from the last time they saw one another. Then a Christmas feast is served. Roughhousing with the cousins ensue. Then the best part of the night, present exchange. We would get a present from each family member, which was great. And then a Santa would walk in and pass out the yearly stuffed Christmas animal to the kids. Now, the Santa was usually someone we all knew, like my aunt's housekeeper's husband or other family members. But this time, I had no earthly clue who this man was in the Santa suit. No one noticed anything strange at first, but after a couple of minutes, I nudged one of my cousins in the arm and said, "Who was that playing Santa?" He shrugged his shoulders and said, "Probably Pete, the housekeeper's husband." I looked this Santa up and down and thought, I don't think so. I looked around the room and noticed some of the adults had a weird look on their faces as well, like they knew something was off. The Santa crouched down to us kids and opened his bag. "Look what I've brought you, my precious little tots," he exclaimed. Then he pulled his hand from the bag, holding one of the stuffed bears. His hands were dirty and stained brown or dark red. His suit was covered in stains and smelled of death. I swear this man hadn't showered in 2 months. He raised his head up slowly and looked into our eyes. His face looked strained, teeth gritted so tightly I thought a tooth was going to snap off and hit me in the face. And his eyes. Oh, his eyes. They were wide and bloodshot and crazed. This was a pure madman we were looking at. He started to twitch, then he rose slowly and said, Enjoy the presents, kiddies." Then he turned around and bolted out the front door. The adults began to clamor, their voices panicked, wondering if that was supposed to happen. Was that Pete? If not, then who the hell was that? Just then Agnes, the housekeeper, said that wasn't Pete. Everyone said, "Are you sure?" "That was not my husband," she said. Then a loud scream came from the living room. Our cousin Jessica kept saying, "Where's Tabitha? Where's Tabitha?" Her 3-year-old daughter. She was nowhere to be found. All the men rushed out of the house, led by my uncle. When they got outside, they saw the man in the Santa suit, pinned to the ground by the neighbor's German shepherd, and little Tabitha peering out of the back seat window. The neighbor explained he was just finishing walking his dog when he saw this guy dressed as Santa running out of the house, holding this little girl, and heard her say, "Let me go. I don't know you, mister. I want to go back inside with my mommy." He heard the Santa say, "Be quiet, little one. I'm going to take you home and give you milk and cookies," then stuffed her in the back seat and closed the door. Then the neighbor said he approached the man in the suit and said, "What's going on here? What are you doing with this child?" He said the man just looked at him and smiled, then attacked. His dog helped protect him and get this crazed Santa to the ground. Everyone thanked the neighbor over and over for preventing Tabitha from being taken. Then we got Tabitha out of the back seat, brought her inside, and called the police. While waiting for the cops to show up, we heard a moaning sound coming from behind the brick wall next to the front door. My uncle and a few of the older cousins went back there to see what it was, and in the shadows, it was Pete, dressed in his Santa suit. He had been knocked out by this crazed Santa. Pete said he got here when he was supposed to, parked his car, got out, went to the trunk to get the bag of stuffed animals, closed it, and started up the driveway to the front door. Then all of a sudden he heard a laugh and felt a blow to the back of his head. Just then the cops showed up and arrested this mad Santa. It turns out the Santa's real name was Charles Bartow. It was explained to us he escaped a prison bus that was transporting him from a mental facility to a maximum security prison. When the bus blew a tire and rolled off the side of the road into a ditch, he had just been given the death penalty for murdering his entire family on Christmas Eve, 2 years prior. Once he escaped the wreckage, he made his way to the nearest town, ambushed a mall Santa on his way back to his car, killed him, stole his suit, and stuffed him in the trunk. That was 2 weeks and 2 states ago. He just got into Las Vegas the day of our party, stopped at a gas station and saw Pete putting gas in his car, and decided to follow him either for a new car or a new suit. He then waited for Pete to get out and get the things from the trunk, then ambushed him from behind and threw him behind the brick wall. He has a demented fascination with Christmas, the police said, and that we were all very lucky. Lucky that the neighbor was there to save Tabitha, and lucky no one was killed. They said the large gathering probably helped that. Yes, we were lucky, but no matter how you slice it, things were never the same again, and our wonderful family tradition never took place again. Thanks, Psycho Santa. Tattoo. As he stood, trembling, before the hotel's bathroom sink, clad only in a pair of striped boxer shorts, Daniel's thoughts returned to the dimly lit tattoo parlor as he clicked through their endless database of skin art. He wasn't sure why he'd gone, as he'd recently gotten a couple of tattoos, so he didn't need one. Then, not finding anything and preparing to leave, the sallow-faced tattoo artist stopped him. "No, I've got something for you." Just for you. It was one of the most intriguing art pieces Daniel had ever seen. Although it consisted of many elements, the piece's most prominent feature was the grinning red face of a devil with twisted golden horns. As the tattooist manipulated the image to simulate the movement of skin, the devil's grin twisted into a snarl of rage. "Yes," Daniel exclaimed. "That's it. How much?" "It's free," the man replied. "But there's a catch. You can never show this to another person, nor look at it yourself. Understand? Never." Daniel should have said no. He should have run. But he didn't care. He needed the art on his skin. Unlike previous tattoos, the ink felt like molten lead melting into the center of his back. The pain was otherworldly, but Daniel made it through. Strangely, and within days of getting the new tattoo, the usually shy Daniel found he'd become incredibly attractive to the opposite sex. Nearly every night found Daniel in bed with a new partner, but afterwards, in the early pre-dawn hours, the right side of his new tattoo would briefly burn like he'd been branded. Still, he never broke the rule, never displayed the tattoo, or looked at it himself. Then, there was Christy, golden-haired Christy, whom Daniel had informed his mother was the one. They were on a weekend ski trip. Daniel was to propose. That night, after a round of mind-blowing sex, he'd forgotten to put his shirt on. As Christy returned to bed, the bathroom's electric light illuminated his back like a Las Vegas marquee. "Whoa," she marveled. "You have a tattoo on your back? It's amazing." Then, quietly, she added, "But who are all those girls?" "Girls? Is that one me?" Christy inquired, coming closer. She never made it to the bed. There was a sudden, high-pitched screeching sound and a bright flash of light. Blinded, Daniel didn't see what happened next. Thankfully, the screeching drowned out Christy's screams. When his eyes had refocused, Daniel's beloved was gone. The left side of Daniel's tattoo suddenly burned like molten lava, but this time he had a sudden, overwhelming urge to see. Now, trembling before the sink, he slowly turned and peered into the mirror. The devil tattoo grinned at him. To its right were tattoos of the faces of his previous one-night stands, but hanging from its left hand, Christy's head. "Never look at it," rasped a voice deep within Daniel's mind. He felt a searing pain and noticed the tattooed image of his own head appear beside Christy's. The screeching began. Daniel screamed. The night they escaped, I turned down the radio, which had told me that those things had already taken over Las Vegas, and I just kept driving on that dark road, the only light coming from the flames of what was once a small town in the distance. All the while, I could only think, what have I done? The images of today were still burned into my mind. The ferocious, bloodthirsty look in the creature's eyes, the looks of glee as they tore into their prey, the sight of my friends and dozens of people I don't even know, lying half-eaten on the concrete floor. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to throw up. So I pulled over and puked on the side of the road. It wasn't until I had finished when I heard the unholy snarling behind me. I hadn't even fully turned around before it jumped on me. I was propelled through the air so fast that the car door in front of me ripped off of its hinges and crashed to the ground a few feet away. I was pinned to the ground, the ugly face of the creature mere inches away from mine. I was close enough to see the specks of flesh in its teeth. I tried to break free, but that only made its smile bigger. I should have listened to my parents. This was all just a joke. But I was still intent on learning the truth, and now, those things were out now. So much was done to keep them at Area 51, and it all went to waste. Not because of some highly trained terrorist, or even the creatures themselves, but because of some dumb, unwilling millennials responding to a joke event. All this death, all this destruction, all just because of a goddamn meme. I can protect you from being replaced by robots. Everyone is scared by being replaced by AI or robots, and as the days go by, it seems to be more of a reality. Take driverless cars and driverless trucks, for instance. These vehicles drive themselves, and there are driverless car companies all over the place now, like in San Francisco and Las Vegas. The world is changing. Imagine all those taxi drivers and truckers who will be out of a job. Imagine all those food delivery people who will not be needed anymore. Physical manual labor jobs will go to the robots. And if you thought creative people would never be taken over by machines, well, Chat, GPT, and image generators are just a few examples that will be relied upon heavily in the future. I can assure you that I can protect you from being taken over by any kind of robot or an AI. I got a group of people who are coming to see me so that they can be protected from being replaced by robots. These are people who are fathers, mothers, builders, truckers, graphic designers, and even accountants. I even have an actual surgeon in the group who is scared of machines eventually advancing to doing the whole surgery on its own. The overall fear is real. It truly is. And nobody knows what to truly do. With machines advancing to do everything, human beings will lose purpose. Like take the surgeon, for example. His identity and status is at being a surgeon. A lawyer's identity and pride is being a lawyer. And jobs alter your personality and the type of individual you will become. I'm sure there are those who will enjoy getting a universal basic allowance. Majority, though, want to carve out their own future, and machines will steal that. When the group arrived, I was so thrilled, and I assured all of them that everything was going to be okay. There was a bit of a group therapy session, and they all talked about how they feel about their jobs being taken over. They were a bit resentful at the boomer philosophy of work and how it had failed. They also feel resentful at future generations who will never get to experience work and get handouts all their lives while they had to work. Then it was time for the main event. I told them all to go into a room, and by going into this room, they will be protected from robots taking over their jobs. When they went into the room, I could hear the screams right away. The only way I could protect them from being replaced by robots is by making them into a robot. Blood is flowing on the ground. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.